Alrighty, so sorry for the second video. Well, maybe not sorry. Something just occurred to me that I didn't cover in my first video, and so I thought I would create a second one just to be able to be a little bit more comprehensive. So there are two things that I wanted to cover about the digital gauge cluster that I didn't really get to on the last video. So let's go ahead and take a look at it. As you know, I mentioned in my earlier video that there are basically three major displays that you can get to. There's really four. So you have my mode, which we covered, right? And you have gauges, which we covered. And then, of course, there is the trip and fuel info as well. Now, I mentioned in my last video that you can scroll through and get various different items here through that, and that's what I forgot in my last video. So with that, I'm going to go ahead and mention that one of the cool things when you go to the Mustang menu, when you go to gauges and you pull up the gauges, there is some really cool stuff here that you have. So I talked about how temperatures are a big thing for me that I like to track when I'm pushing the car. This is really cool stuff, but like the trip, you can scroll up and down in the gauges menu. So you can get various different gauges here that are handy, right? And then you have an accelerometer where you can track your G-forces. So this is essentially how aggressively you're driving the car. And if I'm not mistaken, the Mustang can pull right around like 0.98. I think it can pull close to a G in the lateral skid pad. I mean, these are impressive cars. I love these things. But that's what this is. And as you can tell, looking at it, I have been super gentle on this car just because I still feel like it's in the break-in period. I want to give it a solid 3,000 to 4,000 miles before I start pushing it hard. But that is what comes in handy here. So you can scroll through this stuff, right? And by the way, don't pay attention to the blinking that was going on, or that's going on here in the vacuum boost. That's fairly normal. It's because the vehicle isn't running, so it gets a little wonky like that because the sensor is just waiting for some kind of error. So I've looked this up and I've been told not to worry about it. So that's the nice thing about knowing people at Ford. Anyways, again, cool stuff here. So other cool stuff that you can do in the digital gauge cluster, I didn't cover this last time as extensively as I should have, and that is the track apps. So in the track apps, you can track various different ways, various different metrics of your performance. So where the gauges are all about tracking what the car is doing and how the car is doing, the track apps are more about how you're doing. So these metrics as a driver, you can pull up. We talked about line lock, which again is pretty cool stuff. It's not a feature that I'm likely to use, but hey, you never know. It's nice to have it on the EcoBoost. New, I think, for 2019. It might have been there for 18, but I'm pretty sure it's 19. Anyways, the way winter gets cold around here, maybe it'll come in handy every now and then. But suffice to say, there are very cool apps here that go beyond what you're used to from the small LCD screen in previous Mustangs. So one example of this is the lap timer. And you'll notice that when you use a track app, the display goes full on track mode, even if the car's dynamics are not in track mode, which will be reflected in the lower left-hand corner there. By the way, this blank empty space in the left here is where the gear selector, or rather whichever gear you're in for the automatic, that'll be displayed here, and then your speedometer here. So you'll have miles per hour here, whatever gear you're in here, and then the lap timer, you press OK to begin. And as you can see, I mean, this is all performance oriented. It's almost like being in a video game. It's really cool stuff. As you hit OK, you can see how your laps are going, which is handy for the track. And you just keep hitting OK as you cross that finish line, and you'll get the delta. So, if you're going faster in a successive lap, it shows up in green. If you're taking longer on a particular lap, that'll be reflected in red. It's just incredible how that's done, because even that tiny little detail where the color changes, you can just see at a glance, how you're tracking, right? And so anyways, of course you hold OK to exit, and you will have the ability to review. Very different than what you might be used to in the previous setup. And if you hit OK again, You can go back to the track apps menu. You can repeat this with the lap timer. You can exit track apps altogether. But suffice it to say, even when you get to the menu and you want to say view results, right? And you can store them for 3 different tracks, which is just effing awesome. But anyways, as you can see, the full use of the display is, well, it's on display here. You get an enormous amount of information that shows up here, and it's just very cool. So all things concerned or considered, you're getting one hell of a lot of value out of this digital gauge cluster. And we talked about vehicle settings. We talked about vehicle settings like my color and things like that in the previous video. And I will say that the way I have come to live with my car, we'll turn off the lights here because they've been on long enough, because I also want to show you what this cool stuff is. The way I've lived with my car, I have made use of, since I'm the only driver and the only owner of this vehicle, I've made use of the seat and mirror settings, which don't change, but it also saves your my color settings. So it is super handy to be able to change the mood of your drive, of your environment on the road. So this can only happen while the vehicle is fully stopped. It will not work if you're in drive or sport. You need to be in neutral or park. But if you know you've got a long road trip coming and you know that that red is easier on your eyes, you just can configure that, right? So I've configured it where everything changes to red, or at least everything that can change. You got the door handles, you got the cup holders, you got the footwells, gauge clusters. This is easier on the eyes when you're driving at night. It's really cool stuff. I kind of wish that Ford would let you change this stuff as well. Between the steering wheel and the center stack and the headlamp or lighting selector, I wish those things would change as well. But frankly, it's not that bad. These things are pretty easy on the eyes, but where your eyes are mostly going to be, it matters. So for 3, I went and matched it to everything else. It's ice blue for everything. Didn't know what to do with it. I'll figure it out later and experiment with it later. But in the meantime, it's a really nifty feature to have where you can just press a button and then change the lighting to whatever you want it to be. So I think that covers it. It's getting a little late here, so I'm going to call it a night and stop holding you up. But thanks for putting up with me, and if you have any additional questions, please feel free to call. I really enjoyed our conversation tonight, and I hope these couple of videos were handy for you. So have a good night, and I will talk to you later. Take care.